Apparently Nintendo have some their third parties for Nintendo is going down the shitter apparently. So apparently they're flopping, says Young Yeah. But we're gonna find out if it's true or not.
So the Nintendo Switch 2 has been out for a few days now, enough time that we're able to gauge the general performance surrounding this platform, both in terms of hardware sales and software sales.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to hardware, the Nintendo Switch 2 is selling phenomenally well. It's broken records for the fastest selling console of all time. Nintendo has confirmed on
It's okay, I'm not part of that 3.5 million, so
June 11th, 2025, that the Switch 2 sold over 3.5 million units worldwide in its first 4 days. Like, it's not even close when it comes to the previous record holder, PlayStation 4. That console sold 1 million units in the first 24 hours, but within 4 days, it did not manage to sell 3.5 million units. So yeah, the Switch 2, high demand. Nintendo was able to
it's because they were able to stock up on inventory. Remember, they said that they don't want any scalpers to basically like buy them up and then sell them. So they put a lot of regulation on that, and then they also made a shit ton of inventory for it too as well, so enough people who are not scalpers can get their hands on a Nintendo Switch, which is a good positive. You know, imagine Cole pulled off a Mudahar and want to get it. No, I ain't gonna get it, to be honest. I'd rather own my games, thank you very much. So that's why I still have physical copies of my PlayStation 4 games, PlayStation 3 games, PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, DS, 3DS, the original Switch. I also have like the regular Switch games. I don't have a Nintendo Switch. I just have the games themselves because originally I was supposed to have a Nintendo Switch, but I gave it to my sister because that was during the time or so that rumors were spreading or so about a new Nintendo Switch. But that was like 4 years ago. Yeah, it was like literally four plus years ago, and it never came out, and I was just disappointed, and now I have no Switch, so and that's pretty much about it.
provide enough supply for people to get their hands on the new console. And then on the software side of things, we got this research right here by Outlet, the
Truly
game
Gamer's
business,
Choice,
scrolling
this
down
guy.
and find some data when it comes to how both first-party and third-party titles performed.
All
Now, the
right.
big launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2 was Mario Kart World.
Of course.
And it should come as no surprise that this game is a huge hit for Nintendo. So, for example, you can see statistics right here of how 62% of physical Switch 2 game sales were from first-party games, so basically Mario Kart World, and that's excluding the actual Mario Kart World bundle. If you include,
Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think like content creators are the only ones who can benefit from the Nintendo Switch because they can make content out of it and get the money back in return, you know? That's like literally the only type of people who literally like can justify buying a Switch 2, you know? And then just people who just enjoy having Nintendo in general, so.
that, the percentage is significantly higher. So in the UK, for example, 86% of Switch 2 physical game sales were from first-party games, including the Mario Kart World bundle. So a vast majority of people who bought a Switch 2 bought Mario Kart World with it. And given the universal appeal that
I just personally don't like Nintendo. I don't like the practices they do, like the practices they do with Nintendo with their audiences and everything like that. I just don't support that. I just don't like it. That's probably the reason why I never really played any Nintendo game. The only Nintendo games I played was like Time Splitter on the GameCube, but I was at a friend's house. I played one of the Zelda games. The one where like Link is on an island or something like that. It's like pixel art style. It's like top view. I don't know which one that one is. I played one of the Mario games. It was on the island. It was on some kind of island or something like that. It had a world map view and something like that. I played the Wind Waker. No, it's not Wind Waker. No. Mario Sunshine. I only played the demo of it in a store when like stores used to have like video game demos. That's the only time I ever played that one. I played the original Mario game. I played Duck Hunt. Yeah, Duck Hunt was another game that I played back then. I don't know if this was on the Sega Genesis or if this was on the Nintendo, but the Aladdin game. There was like an Aladdin game that I used to play it or so. I'm trying to remember anything else. Anything else? I'm trying to dig up some history or so. I think that's pretty much it. I think those are the like Yoshi. I think Yoshi's Island or so I played too as well. The one with the where Yoshi had to take care of a crying baby or so of Mario or Luigi or so. I played that one. I don't think I got into Pokemon until Pokemon Sapphire and Ruby. Sapphire and Ruby was the actual first Pokemon entry I got into, I think, if I remember correctly. But I did watch the show, so I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's kind of like basically it.
Mario Kart has, even among casual gamers, it was smart of
I actually did not play Animal Crossing. I know about Cookie Mama, never played Cookie Mama. I know about Harvest Moon, but I've never played Harvest Moon. I do have one of the Final Fantasy games, one of the Final Fantasy Tactic games on the GameCube.
them to launch with a new Mario Kart game. But when it comes to third-party games, that's a whole different story. The game business confirmed from their research that most third-party Switch 2 games posted very low numbers, with one third-party publisher stating that the numbers that they saw were way below their lowest estimates. It was also confirmed that the best-selling third-party game on the Switch 2 was none other than CD Projekt's own Cyberpunk 2077. This is a game that, while
I think the only reason why people would have bought Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch is probably to do comparison videos of like the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk, and then compare it with, like, you know, the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, probably just comparing stuff and whatnot. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that's also part of the numbers for that.
launch was rough, over time has garnered a lot of praise because of the way they fixed the game and all the content that they've added, and the
I personally don't praise it. I'll give them a little bit like an E for effort, but I wouldn't praise them because, you know, they should have done it correctly at the very beginning, you know?
overhauling various aspects that needed tweaking that turned the game around in a way that happens very rarely. And seeing the complete edition come out on the Switch 2, it run fairly well for a portable console as small as it is, and for it to have a full physical release where the entire game data is in the cartridge instead of this whole game key card situation. All of that has paved the road to a lot of people wanting to test out the game on the Nintendo Switch 2. But generally speaking, third-party game sales have not been stellar. Now, while third-party games performed a little better compared to Switch 1's third-party releases, when you look at the ratio of Switch 1 sales to third-party game releases versus Switch 2 sales and third-party releases, that's where the picture becomes clear. The Switch 2, again, the fastest-selling game console in history, 3.5 million units in 4 days. With that kind of install base at
but when people are buying the Nintendo Switch, they want to buy like the first party games, you know. That's basically how, you know, well, the problem is like all these third party games, like they've already came out. Like people already played them. Like the Hogwarts Legacy one, the Cyberpunk 2077, or the Street Fighter, what other third party game did they release? I don't really know, to be honest. Whatever other third party specifically, like they've already came out before, you know. They want to play like the new games, like the new Donkey Kong Bonanza, the Mario Kart game, the what is it? I think they're making a new Zone of Ender game, I think, if I remember correctly. Or is it Daemon X Machina? It's either Daemon X Machina or Zone of Ender. I forgot which one it was. I know it's one of the mecha games. And then also, I know for a fact that like that one Bloodborne inspired game is going to make a big splash for the Nintendo Switch. I can definitely see the Nintendo Switch like sales going up a little bit more higher for that Bloodborne esque inspired game from FromSoft.
Launch, the expectation was that third-party games would sell just significantly better than what they did, but that's just not what ended up being the case. And there are a number of reasons worth highlighting for why results ended up the way they did, starting with the fact that, well, Mario Kart World is the big new release, and so a lot of people gravitated towards that game, whereas a lot of the third-party releases that we...
Plus, also, on top of that, let me just drop this as well on top of it. When was the last time, how old is the other, what Mario Kart is it? Mario Kart 8 or so? Let me see. When did Mario Kart 8 come out? So we had like 2014 was the last Mario Kart, and then they made a deluxe version of it, right? They made like some kind of deluxe version of it specifically. So this was 2014, 2017. So they made a deluxe version 2017 for it. So it's like, you know, it's been like what? 18, 2019, 2020, 2021. It's been like 8 years since we had a new Mario Kart game. So you know, it's just like, you know, I think it's about a right time or so for a new Mario Kart game to come out if it's been like 8 years in development. Well, a little bit more than 8 years technically, because it came out in 2014, I think, if we looked at it last time. So
saw on launch day were ports, essentially. They were old games. So here's a list of some of the third-party launch titles that we...
Bravely Default, man. I want to play this franchise so badly. I heard great things about this franchise.
saw on the Nintendo Switch 2, Bravely Default. It's an old game. You've got Room Factory Guardians of Ozma. This is actually a new game, but it's also available on the Switch 1 and other platforms.
That's probably the reason why, because if it's available on the Switch 1 and you don't even own your games on the Switch 2, there's probably a good majority of people who just they either bought the Switch 1 version of the game or they just played it on the Switch 1.
It was not a Switch 2 exclusive. Split Fiction, it's a game that we've already played or it's seen a release on other platforms. Final Fantasy VII Remake, there's also a port. Street Fighter 6 is a port. Civilization 7 is a port.
No one's playing Civilization on 7 on the Nintendo Switch, let's be honest here.
Port. Cyberpunk itself is a port. Hogwarts Legacy, Yakuza 0, so on and so forth. These are all games that, for the most part, we have seen released on other platforms that people likely already own on other platforms.
They've already
with the
beaten
appeal
it.
of getting it for the Nintendo Switch 2 being the portability aspect. But there's also the fact that people have bought, you know, portable gaming PCs like the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally X. So if they own that stuff on their Steam library and they've bought those kinds of PC portable hardware, then you get a situation where there's not a whole lot of reason to double dip into Nintendo Switch 2 versions of these games. There's just nothing in the way of like brand new Nintendo Switch 2 third-party games that make third-party releases enticing enough for them to do significant figures. Another potential reason that the game business highlighted that I do agree was likely on some level a significant contributor was the fact that Nintendo did not allow media to do early Switch 2 reviews, and in turn, they didn't allow a lot of media outlets to review those third-party games on the Nintendo Switch 2 and essentially, you know, put articles out there that would allow people to know what games are coming out and, you know, be informed about the quality.
I'm wondering if they did that because the problem is they have to upload the data onto their software, like half of the game, or like remember, because you have to download the game, right? So I'm curious if they have to upload that game into the data of Nintendo in order for them to download it, but then it's not available for the reviewers. So that's like a huge caveat for them. I don't know. I'm just kind of playing like what if, you know, if that's the reason why.
Quality of those releases, interest surrounding third-party games was just, you know, it was an uphill battle because of the lack of coverage that Nintendo paved the road for. So I think that's one area where Nintendo kind of shot themselves in the foot. It's also worth keeping in mind that the Nintendo Switch 2 is backwards compatible, so that means that you can get Mario Kart World, and then you still have a huge library of games from the Switch 1 that you can choose from, which kind of dilutes attention away from the third-party releases that came out for the Nintendo Switch 2 specifically, because there are just so many games you can play on the Switch 2 that were built for the Switch 1, combined with the fact that the Switch 2 releases are mostly ports, and that just makes it just less interesting to get third-party games at this stage. And then a potential influence is the fact that people are turned off by the concept of game key cards, which are physical releases that don't contain the data in the actual cartridge. The cartridge itself just contains the key, essentially, to be able to access the game, but the game itself, the data, has to be downloaded from the internet, which defeats the purpose of a physical release that gives you some semblance of ownership where all of the data is on the physical media, so that you are able to preserve the game. And so that way in the future, when servers go down and when you're not able to re-download stuff, you don't lose access to those things because the data.
I can imagine the Nintendo Switch 2 internet, like the service for Nintendo Switch 2 turns off in like the next like 15 years or something like that, right? The people who have those cartridges specifically and they want to play that old game or something, like, man, I want to play that old game on the Nintendo Switch 2. Pops it in and then says, you know, you can't play this game. You must require to log on online or so to download the rest of the game. But then the network is down. The support network is down for the Nintendo Switch 2. It's like you just got a little empty little cartridge right there, you know?
Is in the actual physical media, and you're not relying on the servers of the company who are providing the service. The game key cards essentially have an expiration date, whereas actual physical media where the data is housed in it does not. The only expiration date there is just your ability to take care of the physical media itself. As long as that's there, you can keep that game forever and you have access to it. So yeah, game key cards are essentially just digital game downloads with an extra step. It's just kind of an inconvenience and something that people are not about. It's worth noting that a lot of people do download digitally. It's a lot of like the hardcore fans and gamers who really push for physical media, but the general masses, you know, the world is becoming more and more digital, and people are kind of leaning into the convenience of just being able to download stuff and not having to rely on a physical media that you have to like put into your console and stuff like that. And so Daniel Ahmad, for example, here analyzed this whole situation, and this is not him endorsing game key cards. It's just kind of expressing the reality of how the masses, for the most part, don't care as much about this aspect. And it's
usually the casual gamers. They don't, because like they're not well informed. They don't really know any about this stuff, you know. Probably when the next like 15 years, when the Nintendo Switch 2 online services go down, then they'll understand, you know?
Not the number one reason for why third-party games are not selling well currently on the Nintendo Switch 2. A lot of people are saying that Cyberpunk 2077 being the number one best-selling third-party game on the Nintendo Switch 2 is no surprise, given the fact that they don't do game key cards and all of the game data is contained within the card.
That's true. That's actually very true. The Cyberpunk game itself is not a key card. It's the actual full game itself on the cartridge.
And that might have positively influenced people's purchase of that game. And I do think there was some positive influence there, but it wasn't the only reason. Cyberpunk 2077 just generally tends to be a bestseller on any platform. So the fact that that sold more than other third-party games on Nintendo Switch 2 is no surprise. And even then, the margins aren't significantly different from other third-party releases. So for example, right here, Daniel Ahmad, who is also an analyst in the games industry, notes that Mario Kart World was the game to buy for Nintendo Switch 2 with an 80% attach rate. Even with Cyberpunk 2077 being the best-selling third-party game, its attach rate and the individual attach rate of all third-party games was less than 5%. So Cyberpunk 2077 was the best-selling third-party game, but not by a whole lot. It still didn't sell on the level that something like Mario Kart World did. To give an idea, 5% of 3.5 million units is 175,000 copies, and just about every individual third-party game release on Nintendo Switch 2, including Cyberpunk 2077, sold, you know, a little less than that or significantly less than that. Daniel Ahmad is saying that game key cards aren't an influence at all. He's saying that there may be the fourth or fifth factor for why third-party games didn't sell well. Not to mention that while Cyberpunk 2077 was the bestseller, other third-party games like Street Fighter, which is a game key card, weren't too far behind. So it is not the number one influence for why third-party games aren't selling. It is probably on some level an influence, but not the sole reason. I think the main reason ultimately is that the third-party games that came out for the Nintendo Switch 2, there was just nothing brand new. There was just nothing that people haven't really played before.
Because these games already came out before. They probably already beaten and they probably already finished. It'd be like, or some people, well, when it comes to fighting games in general, you know, maybe there's some people just like, Street Fighter, I don't really care too much anyway. So it's just kind of like the mentality of some of them are.
combined with the lack of just coverage on these third-party games because of Nintendo's refusal to send out early review units for the Switch 2 and early review copies for those third-party games. But yeah, with all said and done, this is the Nintendo Switch 2 situation. It's selling really well, but games aside from Mario Kart World, you know, people are not partaking in them all that much, which highlights that Nintendo Switch 2 really does need more games. We are going to see Donkey Kong Bonanza come out soon. We've got third-party games that have been announced exclusively for the Switch 2, like that, you know, the new FromSoft game, and among many others. And there are going to be a lot of new third-party games coming out on the Switch 2 as well as other platforms. So it'll be interesting to see how those perform. But as far as launch third-party games go, they're not selling all that well. But I suppose only time will tell how third-party games will do in the future. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, the way the console has sold ridiculous numbers within the first couple of days.
I'm not surprised that the console was going to sell well. You know, I'm personally not surprised whatsoever.
The performance of first-party versus third-party games, and what your predictions are for the future of Nintendo Switch 2 hardware sales and software sales. Share your thoughts.
I think the hardware sales will probably increase with more games coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2, especially that FromSoft game that they're making, that Bloodborne inspired one. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up a little bit too from Donkey Kong Bonanza. What other heavy hitters coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2? I think the Daemon X Machina 2 probably might increase. Might get some like some enthusiastic robo people, you know, who are into like, you know, the mecha stuff. I can definitely see people being interested in that. I don't know, we'll see. I think the hardware sales will probably increase. I wouldn't be surprised if by I don't know what's coming out later at the end of this year for the Nintendo Switch 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up to like 5 million or something like that. 5 to 8 million units or so sold in a year. Or technically half a year, technically, because it wouldn't be a full year. But we'll see. Power World and Astrobot will boost their sales. Oh my god. Seeing Power World on a Nintendo Switch would be the most wildest thing to see. Yeah, but you know, that's kind of like my personal opinion. That's the end of the video. You guys can comment, like, subscribe, do all that fancy jazzy stuff. Am I surprised? No. Third party games are doing pretty shitty compared to compared to the only first party game anyways. No, I'm not really surprised because all of these games already came out beforehand. So it's just kind of like, you know, meh. It is what it is. Anyways, that's the end of the video. And peace.